Welcome to Kaiser University Multidisciplinary Center as we present today's webinar, Make Time Management Work for You, presented by Dr. Rosa, Graduate School of Education Professor and Advisor.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. Depending on when you're watching this workshop, if it's around the same time as we are presenting, then this is an opportune time for you to explore your time management since it's the end of the school year. So you can reflect on how you think you did with your time management, and at the same time, get some tips and then be able to make some goals for the next academic year, how you want to better manage your time, and then start practicing this summer as well. So by the end of this webinar, you should be able to identify strategies at the same time to accommodate student needs, identify ways to prioritize teacher responsibilities, and identify technological resources that can aid in time management. So with the webinars, I like to start out with quotes, just to put things in perspective and for us to not think that time management is just an individual problem, but rather a problem that most people, I think, find challenging, or at least think that they can improve on better managing their time. So time isn't the main thing, it's the only thing. It's not enough to be busy. The question is, what are we busy about? And then time is what we want most, but what we use worst. So I think what all these quotes are alluding to is that time is the same for everyone, equal for everyone. We all have the same amount of minutes. It's a matter of how effectively are we using these minutes and taking advantage of those minutes. So that's what we're going to explore today throughout this presentation. So is time on your side? So when you think about, as a teacher, administrator, working in the school districts, working at the state level, everything that possibly can happen in a day, is it even at your advantage, or are you even being set up for failure? Because there are so many things to do. And here are just some examples off the top of my head of things maybe, at least as a teacher, you would be engaged in. Morning meetings, and we have an webinar on morning meetings on our library, so check that out. Lesson planning, creating assessments, setting up and attending parent meetings, setting up and attending student meetings, attending grade level, school-wide and or subject matter meetings, creating IEPs, enforcing IEPs, tutoring after school, that's something you decide you would like to do, dismissal duty, networking, whether it be amongst your grade, amongst colleagues or people in the field, grading the assessments after you create them. And then who would think you then actually have to teach in front of your students. And while you're teaching, maybe there's some disruption, or maybe there's some issues going on. So perhaps engaging in some classroom management, and then any professional development such as this that you are taking time out of your day to explore. So when you think about 8 hours in a day, and we know that most people work more, but when you think about that time and see all the responsibilities, it's almost like we're being set up for failure. So it's so important that we use our time effectively and brainstorm and figure out within ourselves, what are we good at, what are our strengths, and what are our opportunities for improvement. So in order to accomplish this, I'm going to have you take a time management self-assessment. So if you're watching this on recording, I would suggest you take out a paper and pencil, or if you have an iPhone, you can use some type of notes app on your iPhone and write 1 through 15. So list 1 through 15 on a piece of paper or on your iPhone. And then I'm going to ask you 15 questions. And you're going to be honest and think about, put yourself in a situation when you're thinking about answering these questions, thinking about when you are actually at your busiest. So whatever time of year that is, if you're wrapping up the school year now, that could be right now. So thinking about the time that you're at your busiest when you're answering these questions. And all the questions are going to be a scale of 1 through 5. So 1 will be not at all, 2 will be rarely, 3 will be sometimes, 4 will be often, and 5 will be very often. And then you're probably going to need a calculator. So have your calculator app on your phone as well. So here we go. I'm going to read the question and you're going to do 1 through 5 for each and every question. And within themselves, so not only are we taking the self-assessment, but as we answer each question and address each question, there are tips within each question as well. So we're doing 2 things. We're understanding ourselves and then at the same time recognizing getting some tips on how we can better utilize our time management. So here we go. Question number 1, which if you are good at balancing your time, and you've already answered question 1 because it's been on the screen for a while. The tasks I work on are the ones with the highest priorities. So think about how often you do this. And once again, not at all 1, rarely 2, sometimes 3, 4 is often, and 5 is very often. The tasks I work on are the ones with the highest priority. All right, next question. I find myself completing tasks at the last minute or asking for extensions. And that's on a 1 through 5 scale. Put your number down, and then we'll move on to the next question. Question number 3. I set aside time for planning and scheduling. So whether that is in the morning before work, after work for the next day, or possibly in between, maybe during a free period. Do you set aside time for planning and scheduling? 1, not at all. 2, rarely. 3, sometimes. 4, often. 5, very often. Question 4, I know how much time I spend on each of the various tasks that I do. And I'm going to pause after each question for those of you who need to read in silence. Number 5, I find myself dealing with interruptions. 1, not at all. 2, rarely. 3, sometimes. 4, often. 5, very often. Question 6, I use goal setting to decide what tasks and activities I should work on. Question 7, I leave contingency time in my schedule to deal with the unexpected. Number 8, I know whether the tasks I am working on are high, medium, or low value. Number 9, when I'm giving a new assignment, I analyze it for important and prioritize it accordingly. Number 10, I am stressed about deadlines and commitments. And all these questions will depend on the time of year, but think about, you can either think about today or think about when you're at your most busiest. Number 11, distractions keep me from working on critical tasks. And for those of you who have been working from home, this question could be unique to this year. Although there'll always be distractions, maybe not as many as there were this year. Number 12, I have to take work home in order to get it done. And I would also answer that question. And if you show up 2 hours before work or stay 2 hours after work, then that would be similar to taking work home. The gist of the question is, do you work way past the hours that you're allotted? So that's number 12. I have to take work home in order to get it done. Not at all, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. 13, I prioritize my to-do list. 14, I confirm my priorities with my supervisor. That could be a principal, assistant principal, team lead, curriculum specialist. And then finally, number 15, before I take on a task, I check that the results will be worth it. And that's not at all, rarely, sometimes, for often, 5 equals very often. And of course, that would be subjective. Worth it could be whether you'll feel accomplished. Worth it could be whether your supervisor needs the task, so you're getting it off his or her plate as well. So worth it can have different meaning. So those are the 15 questions, and all of them in itself, of course, have a tip, because for the most part, all these questions we should be trying to doing often or very often. So I'm going to have you add up the 15 questions. I'll give you some time to do that. So take the point value of each question, add it up, or just round it off, eyeball it. And then the 15 questions should give you some guidance for how to manage the rest of this webinar. So if you scored a 15 to 30, which means most of your answers were ones or twos, then very important that you pay close attention to this webinar. Even just looking at the 15 questions will give you tips. 31 to 45, doing well, but can use some improvement. That's if you put threes for most of these questions, twos or threes. And then if you scored 46 to 75, you're managing your time effectively. You should be co-facilitating this webinar with me. So that means at any time, make a comment or raise your hand, and feel free to chime in and help teach the rest of us how to manage your time. So the self-assessment was broken up into about 5 different sections. So another way to look at your points for the purposes of this webinar is to see where you scored low on some of these questions. So if you scored low on questions 6 and 10, then that you should pay particular attention to goal setting. And we're going to have a webinar upcoming on goal setting. So check out for that, look out for that. Prioritization, questions 1, 4, 8, 13, 14, 15. So take a look at your numbers, and maybe that is an area you want to pay particular attention to or follow up with after the webinar. Managing interruptions, 5, 9, 11, and 12. Procrastination, which all of us can easily fall into, but there was only one question, question number 2. But whether you scored that question high or low doesn't mean that you're great or need improvement. So pay attention to procrastination. And then scheduling, maybe it's a matter of how you're scheduling your time. And that would be questions 3 and 7. So depending on your answers to any of these questions, and you may want to take a picture on your phone to have this screen handy as we're going through the webinar and as you look at your different answers for your different questions. But I'll give you another couple of seconds to look at your questions. And then we're just going to have some tips and go over some of these for the next couple of slides. All right, so goal setting, SMART goals. So there's an acronym called SMART. Um, and you will find when in a lot of goal setting seminars, you'll see the SMART acronym used. I took these definitions from the US Department of Health and Human Services, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. But SMART goals are specific. That means you're using numbers and percentages. So I will go to the gym 3 times this week, would be an example. Measurable, how do I know when the goal is achieved? Well, after my 3rd time at the gym, then I would know that that goal was achieved. Achievable, are the goals you are setting reachable? So if you're having from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. parent conferences, and maybe it's not realistic or achievable for you to go to the gym this week, so that may not be achievable. Relevant, does the goal relate to the need? So if my goal is to eat healthy, yes, going to the gym will help, but is it directly related to going to the gym, the actual physical activity of going to the gym? And then time bound. So by the end of, so I said 3 days by the end of the week. So that's how it's time bound. So those are the 5 different components of setting goals that you should be looking for when setting goals. So here are some examples of setting SMART goals. By blank, all my weekly lesson plans will be completed the Thursday before they are due. By blank, I will arrange my schedule to build in at least 1 hour of me time every day. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And by blank, my files will be organized and I will discard outdated material. All goals probably all of us would want to do right now at this moment. So those are SMART goals in a nutshell. And there will be an entire webinar next Thursday dedicated to goal setting. So I encourage you to participate in that one. Prioritization. So prioritization can have different meanings for different people, but prioritization should be based on either 2 things: what's priority to you, and then what I do, what's priority to the other people around me, because I personally do not want to hold up, especially my supervisor, hold up things that they are waiting for me to work on. So that's how I prioritize for the most part. And I use my email inbox also to help me prioritize things, but we'll go over that later. So recognize when you're, some tips for prioritization, recognize you cannot do it all. Everything is not equally important. Decipher between the important and the urgent. Respond to interruptions while still making planned work the priority. So things may happen during the day where you're interrupted, but still make sure you try and focus and go right back to what the priority is. And that interruption could be your supervisor, could be an emergency that's taking place in the building. So that does become the priority. So that is perfectly acceptable for that. Get it out of your head and on a list. If you happen to look at my desk right now, you would see a whole bunch of papers with lists, trying to get things done before I go on my summer leave. Execute the most important task first. A lot of times we may try and spend time on the easiest task, but spending time on the easiest task doesn't mean that that is the most important or the most effective use of our time. So try, when you prioritize, execute the most important task first. Group similar tasks together to increase efficiency and avoid multitasking. And then, of course, when in doubt, put students first. So if it's not something that's due to the boss or something that's really time sensitive, then what would be the best bang for students? And that's how you should organize your time. Managing interruptions, that is going to happen whether you're on a call, whether you're at home teaching. or in the classroom, interruptions is something that's almost inevitable. So if you're interrupted, there's some things you can do. You can use some nonverbal cues. Um, for me, I think I just have a look to give. And I think once people see that look, they know they should not interrupt. Uh, place reminders on desks. So you could do that if you're actually in the classroom. Disengage. If any of you are a Real Housewives fan, then you Salt Lake City, then the disengage word is something that is relevant in current times. So yeah, just disengage with the interruption and let it be. Um, you can talk generously say if a student is interrupting or a parent, can you hold that thought? Or one moment, please, and we'll get right back to you. And then you can also have an individual private meeting with, if it's a student or someone that's causing interruptions, having the student recognize their behavior by having those private meetings. So procrastination, if you're in summer mode and you're getting ready for fall and you just can't find the energy to start, even though you said, I'm not going to do like I did last year, I'm going to be focused and I'm going to be ahead of the game. So if you find yourself still lacking some energy, here are some tips specifically for summer. You can involve family and friends with the classroom decorating. I have teachers in the family and we go and decorate the classroom. Um, Start off with a small number of emails in your inbox. So if you don't want to focus on your inbox during the summer, then maybe say, oh, I'll do 1 or 2 emails a day, or set a specific time, or one day a week or every other week that you're going to knock out these emails. Complete professional development early. Some of you have your professional development requirements and you know what they're going to be for the upcoming year. And maybe there are some synchronous and even asynchronous opportunities available. So might as well get those out of the way before the school year begins. Syllabus, lesson planning, standards, other advanced planning, that could be done in small little time frames, especially maybe if you're teaching the same grade and you want to try things again, but maybe change up some of the differentiated learning or change some of the activities. That's something you could start thinking about, or at the very least, just be a month in advance. So you plan the first 30 days, and then so that way when you start the school year and you start planning, you're always 30 days out. And then according to life coach Tony Robbins, people become overwhelmed when they have more than 3 things to learn or do. Um, I would say I am higher than that, but if not, so keep that in mind. It is natural if you have things and you're feeling overwhelmed, just natural human response, and just try and manage that overwhelm by making that list and crossing things off and getting stuff done. Scheduling. So there are many things that are going to be out of your control when it comes to scheduling. So make sure that you find out what aspects of time you can control during the day, whether that is a parent conference, student conference, whether you're a person that wants them back to back or need to spread them out. But find out what you can control and when you're best, when you're your best at. So if you're a morning person, they may be putting the most important stuff in the morning. If you're not a morning person, then maybe moving some of that stuff to the afternoon. But finding out what aspects of time you can control. Schedule concrete blocks of teaching time for each day. I know some of these are pie in the sky, but if you can, have those blocks scheduled. Plan for smooth transitions between lessons and always try to have materials ready for each lesson or activity. So if you spend time looking for things and searching for items, or having to go and make photocopies because you didn't make them in the morning, there was a line at the photocopier. Try and have all that stuff ready and done. And that could also be part of your 30-day in advance. Or if you can't do 30 days, and do a week in advance. But then once again, you'll always be in advance. Assign homework to extend practice time. So if you feel like you're running out of time, but you still want students to work on the assignment, then that could be part of homework. And then restroom breaks for maximum efficiency. I know that you cannot control the bladders of others, but if you can maybe get on a schedule where you can have those restroom breaks for or for yourself, and then schedule them appropriately so that you can have maximum efficiently for those restroom breaks. So let's transition to if you're allocating time. So let's say you're working on a lesson and you want to allocate time and you want to get it so that you can manage your time effectively. You want to allocate your time appropriately. So let's say that you have a task that you want to, a lesson plan that you want to do. These are some things you should take into consideration when you are allocating specific time. So there's the design of the task. So whatever strategy you use, whatever interaction you're thinking for the task, make sure you have enough time for that. There's a degree of complexity for each task. So especially if you're doing differentiated learning and you have all the different learning styles and different performance areas of your students, then you want to take all that into account, how much time it's going to take for some rather than others. Students' attention span and readiness. If we had an answer to that, we'd probably solve a lot of problems. But trying to factor in students' attention span, which nowadays it seems are getting less and less, and even our own personal attention spans. Students' abilities and needs, and then the pace of the lesson. If you're scaffolding, you want to make sure that you are putting it at an appropriate pace. So some of the easier concepts or what you perceive as easy are maybe done a little bit quicker, and what maybe are more complex, depending on your student levels, and you may have to spend more time on. So let's talk about some specific times. If you've done your best and you've mapped out a time schedule for students to be able to figure out and do a lesson, what are some things that may occur? So let's say that you are running out of time. It's important to look at, and you're hearing this on the news, the root cause of what is happening. So one thing to do is maybe your plan was over ambitious and included unrealistic timeframes. This is something you can definitely do over the summer as you reflect on your school year. Think about how many times maybe you ran out of time and identifying maybe if it's just a problem with your time. You underestimated how challenging students would find the task, activity, or concept. So either you didn't think it was as easy, you thought it may be easier, that more students would get it, or more students would work cooperatively, or more students would pay attention, and then you ran out of time. Or you lost time by being less efficient than you could have been. And we talked about all the tips, having the materials and having things ready for you to go. So how are some ways maybe you can combat running out of time? Well, you can set a realistic time for each activity. So maybe extending, leaving plenty of time for question and answer. So that way, if you run out of time, you can use that question and answer time and then change the question and answer time to maybe something that students can follow up with you later. Make sure to wrap up a lesson in a way that assesses student acquisition. So whether you have some informal assessments that you can work on, some exit tickets, but you want to make sure that students that you can figure out what students learn from your lesson. Another response could be you need to adjust your planned objectives for the next day's lesson, given that you did not meet your original goal. So do not set yourself up for failure a second day if you're doing scaffolding and the second lesson builds on the lesson that you ran out of time, then you want to adjust accordingly your next day's lessons to cover what you missed and then address whatever is coming up in that lesson. So what if you still have time left? So you did all this wonderful planning, wanted to go the full 3 hours, but you still have a good 30 minutes left. So these are some root causes. Perhaps your practice content was not challenging enough. Perhaps you did not plan adequate number of activities for the allotted time. And these are scenarios where it's always better to overplan than underplan. So you should always have a couple of activities in your tool belt just in case you still have time left. And then you underestimated your students' present mastery understanding of the material. So maybe you thought it was going to be a lot harder than it is, and your students just happened to get it. So here are some ways to address this. You could utilize Bloom's taxonomy. So all the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy, you can reword, change the questions, make the questions more on the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. And you can also challenge your students and have them, you can ask more complex questions of them, or you can have them ask each other questions as well. And then we did some wonderful technology workshops on Nearpod and Quizlet, Kahoot. So you can also use some technology. If you look at our library of webinars, you may be able to find some good tips on using technology for situations like where you have time left. You also could extend practice sessions to include a review of previous lesson objectives, but you want to avoid the trap of reviewing material simply because the students enjoy the topic. Constantly push towards your end goal, or you could proceed to the next objective in your sequence. So maybe you have something for tomorrow and you want to give students a preview, or maybe review some of the homework that's associated with either this assignment or tomorrow's assignment. So those are some things you could do when you have time left. But my best advice would be to just have activities ready to go. All right, what if you have designed the most effective creative lesson plan in your mind, but students still do not understand? So here are some of the causes, perhaps, of this. You didn't allocate enough time for guided practice. The lesson material was more challenging to students than anticipated. Or maybe it's just a simple mismatch between patterns of interactions and tasks. So you thought your students were, if they were working on an activity, then that would help them to understand a concept. And it just, for some reason or another, it just didn't get it. And of course, how will you know this? And that is from the informal assessments that we just talked about, or you can use a formal assessment. So what are some response? What are some tips you can do? You can extend your guided practice. So if students still need your support, don't rush it. This is a critical phase that will shape your students' comprehension of the concepts involved. The more deliberate, substantial, and in-depth is your shaping, the less independent practice your students will require. So that is one way to respond, and an important way. Also, if it doesn't seem like additional practice will be sufficient to clear up student misunderstanding, consider rethinking the material and or changing the pattern of interaction. Perhaps maybe you do some group work, dividing people up into groups, either by performing or non-performing or similar performing. Or you can do a think, pair, share, where you pair students up, have them think about it, and then share what they've learned. So these are different techniques that if students do not understand, that you can factor and incorporate. And you want to make note of these, because if you see patterns, every time I teach this, students do not understand blank, then perhaps there is definitely a more effective way, and it's not just the students, or a more effective way that either you or maybe even the textbook or the materials that you're using are just not getting the point across. So take note, compare notes with other teachers. Maybe there are other teachers in the grade that are teaching the topic, and if those students didn't get it, then there is a larger problem, or maybe there's a best practice out there that students do know how to get it. There are teachers that have some strategies to get the points across. So rules and routines, we know how incredibly important it is for our students to stay focused and not get caught up, not get caught by surprise and then lose all of their attention. So you want to create some rules and routines that will help with time management for your students. So something you can do, if you break people up into groups, you can assign a timekeeper. And you can allocate a range of roles within the group activities. So you can have someone take notes, someone take time, someone take turns monitoring the group. But at the end of the day, what you want is every student within the group to feel responsible, to feel like they have a task, an important task in keeping people on time. And that'll hopefully make them more alert, more attentive, and save time in the long run as other people are also responsible for time. So book ending or brightening, that's another way to help time and make students clear on what time is and how much time is being used. So you want to ensure that both the beginning and the ending are clear to all students. So that way the students know exactly how much time is going to be involved in the beginning, and then at the end, how much time they have left. So here's a sample verbiage that you can use. Um, Everyone has finished the worksheet. Jenny, would you sum up the main elements of the story for us? Okay, now that we understand the main elements of the story, let's take 5 minutes to read and know what happened in the story, which begins on page 67. You will have a 5-minute reading period. So being intentional about letting students know how much time they have. You can even put a timer in the front of the classroom. And then also so that you are not over managing your expectations, you know, if you say 5 minutes, you probably need 6 or 7 minutes. So factor that into your planning as you're giving these uh, verbal cues to students and being very specific and direct about the verbal cues. So here are some tips about getting the most from your day, and it's all going to be relative and individualized to you. But these are some tips. Create a routine. So perhaps for those of you who may have scored low on the priorities and not having enough time to prioritize, you want to use the first 30 minutes to schedule and plan the day, or the last 30 minutes. So it's really up to you. I like to use the last 30 minutes to plan for the next day. So that way I can be prepared going into the day. And then I also keep a notepad in reach at all times, so that if something pops up in the middle of the night or something, so it's not in my head and I'm not thinking about how am I going to have time to do this, or what am I going to forget it, I definitely make sure I write it down so that I don't have those issues. So that's that. Have priorities. Start with the most urgent tasks, ones that must be accomplished to keep the class functioning. So that's how you can describe urgent for yourself. And of course, it also is, well, what is due to someone else? So for those of you not directly teaching, maybe you're in administration, maybe you work for the county, maybe you work for the state. What is most important for someone else that's holding them back? You want to keep a detailed time log. So maybe moving forward, you want to actually reflect on what you did. So maybe spending 15 or 20 in 15-minute, 20-minute blocks, what you're focused on. So you can do it two ways. You can be planning for what you're going to do, or you can then take an actual note. So you have what you plan for the day, leave room on that piece of paper, and then what you actually did. And you can start analyzing. Did you schedule too much time? Did you schedule less time, etc.? You want to maintain a visible schedule for students to refer to throughout the day. That's what we talked about earlier, about making sure students have a routine to keep them focused and keep them in the habit, because many of our students do need that routine. So you want to maintain a visible schedule for students and to refer to throughout the day on the classroom or on any smart app you may be using for the day. Assign homework that reinforces skills already taught in class with simple instructions. There's great debate always in lecture, in the literature, about how much homework is appropriate and how much is too much, how much is not enough. But you want to assign homework that reinforces the skills. And of course, for different levels, for those students that seem to have gotten the lesson maybe a little bit more challenging, and for those that didn't, maybe a little bit more remedial homework to reinforce some of the skills that are being taught. And key word is simple instructions. You do not want the instructions to be so overwhelming that the students give up because they can't figure out how to do the assignment. Or they're spending time calling each other trying to figure out how to get things done. All right, here are some more personal tips to manage your day. So identify your time leaks and find ways to plug them. So if you notice that sometime between 12 and 12:30, your stomach is grumbling, and even though you don't want to eat lunch until 1:30, it's still bothering you, then maybe you may want to consider lunch. If there's this one student or administrator that is constantly interrupting or having questions, then maybe you just set that into your time frame so it doesn't throw you so off track. Monitor your energy and concentration levels, so know when is peak time for you. Use your peak time effectively to do your most important tasks. So whether that be the morning, midday, the afternoon, or the evening. If you have too much on your plate, just say no. And I know for some of you, this is hard because you feel like you need to say yes. And there may very well be some supervisors out there that you can't say no to because that is their style. But if you can, learn how to say no. And I believe we have some tips on that. Get organized. Too much time is wasted looking for things. So here are some tips to get organized. You can maybe create folders. These could be physical folders that are on your desk, or these could be folders that are on an app or on your computer. Because how some of you may have a desk and the desk may not, could be overwhelming. And also the same strategy reflects your computer where you have all these different folders, all these different open documents, all these different web browsers open. So you could be overwhelmed by that as well. So you want to have maybe a folder where you have fingertip and routine information, things that you can immediately have access to because you use them to all the time. Since working remotely, you may want to put that all in a folder. So that way, wherever you're working in the world, you have that folder available to you. You may want to create a file that says to be discussed. And that's where you have your staff meeting or staff members you interact with if you have any one-on-ones. Any current projects, if there are trips coming up, camps, committee projects, you can have a folder or files for that. And then some people do what's called tickler files. So let's say there's 31 days this month, or 31 days in the month you're thinking about. Then you can have each day represent 1 through 31, represent each day of the month, consider when the task is due and make a decision on when it will be worked on. So you can either put things that are due on, so let's say today is June 14th, Flag Day. So I can have stuff in my June 14th folder that I want to work on today, that's due today, or maybe I have something due next week on Monday, June 21st, but I want to start working on it Monday, June 14th. So I put it in the June 14th folder, in the 14th folder. So those are options. Use one daily planner or app. So that is something for you to work on. Don't have multiple planners, or don't use, it may not work for you to have a planner and an app because that may be time consuming to transfer one over to the other. And act on an item the first time you read it or touch it. So this can be true, especially for email. You may have a rule maybe to do it twice, once to assess what the email item is, and then the second time you actually work on it. So if you commit to never checking an email more than twice, that can help you save time. So I said, just say no. Here are some tips to just say no, to politely say no. I'd really like to, but I'm overcommitted right now and don't think I'd be able to do it justice. And I probably have used all of these to ranging variabilities, but I am someone notorious for saying no. Thanks for asking, but I really need to spend more quality time with my children, spouse, etc. There's one. Here, I appreciate your confidence in me, but I have other tasks that demand a lot of my time at the moment. I have a lot of commitments already on my calendar. Sorry, I can't help this time. An emphasis on the this time. And then, no, thank you. I'm not ready to take on that additional responsibility just yet. So that may be a little bit more bold. So maybe if you've been working at the school for 30 years, then maybe you could say, no, thank you. I'm just not ready to take on that additional responsibility. But once again, all depending on your level of comfortability. But hopefully, if your supervisor then you will, for your teachers or whoever you're supervising, you will develop a culture where people feel overwhelmed and they're not going to spend time to do something, then they can say no without having some negative repercussions. Email. I am obsessed with my email inbox. I make sure that I try not to have more than 20 to 30 emails in my inbox at a time. So I'm constantly working, and this may not work for everyone. Some people, there are some strategists out there that say don't rely on your email inbox. Don't let what the first incoming email says dictate what you have to do. But I typically do my emails in order, and I just go in there and I respond, especially the ones I can respond quickly, respond, and then go back and try not to look at an email more than twice. Granted, in my email, I said I have about 20 emails. About 10 of them are probably from like 2 years ago that I still have not gotten to because it's still things that need to happen for me to address them. So move emails out of the inbox, and you may want to create in your emails a do now, do later. So you may want to create those folders, but move emails out of the inbox. Read the email only when you have time to act on them. I have a colleague who's terrible. She will read the email, she'll minimize it, and then just forget to even respond. Or the email be minimized for like 3 days. So I would suggest when you read the email, work on it. Set aside 2 or 3 times each day to respond. Delete if it isn't necessary to save. Create a pending follow-up folder. Create folders and save relevant emails in those folders, and then unsubscribe to any irrelevant resources. So if you have an iPhone, there are some emails that the unsubscribe button is right on the top. So I make it a habit, especially during Black Friday when I'm getting all these different sales opportunities. Right after that, I unsubscribe so it's not cluttering my email. And don't be ashamed or afraid to say that you need some self-care. We all do. So here are some things. If time is becoming overwhelming and you look at all the tasks you have to do in the day, feel that time is not on your side, then take some time for yourself. So here are some tips. Keep some items on the desk for an energy boost, whether that be tea, chocolate, protein, a stress ball. 2-minute strategies. So have your timer count down 2 minutes and maybe do a yoga pose, do a walk, do some meditation. Unleash your creativity. So whatever you feel like you're creative, whether it's dancing, singing, cooking, art, whatever you feel like you need to unleash your creativity, then do that, and that could help. Connect with others, unless they're the problem, but share projects with fellow teachers. Make positive phone calls. So many times we only contact parents and volunteers when it's negative. So when they pick up that phone and they know it's going to be negative, they automatically have an attitude and automatically have negative thoughts. So try doing some positive things. That'll make you feel good, and that'll free up your brain to focus on time. Look for the positive quotes, notebooks, any student success stories. Relax. So if you have a little bit more time, TV, and I can give you all the Netflix suggestions, a hot bath if that works for you, music, meditate, and then just getting your body moving, running, dancing, whatever that looks like for you. Here are some online resources that can help you with time. And some of you, your student applications that they use probably have some time management software in there as well. But Toodle-Do, app for organizing tasks, setting goal deadlines, and tracking productivity. Focus Keeper is a timekeeping app that helps you work on tasks in 25-minute increments with 5-minute breaks in between. Slack is an app for collaborating on projects. Remind, which many of you probably already know, the app helps you help parents and keep parents in the loop and stay in touch with students via text without revealing personal contact information. And then there's Rescue Time. It sends weekly reports, indicate where you're spending your time. And then Apple has this wonderful thing. If you have an Apple iPhone, it tells you how much screen time. So if looking at your phone is a problem, then Apple will also tell you about your time and where you're spending your time. So take a look at that as well. All right, that's all I have for now. So if there are questions and answers, and of course, you can always email me at mrosa@kaiseruniversity.edu if you're watching this on demand and don't have a question right at this moment. But remember, we are going to address goal setting in an upcoming webinar, so make sure you look out for that.